What's up, family? Welcome to the New Breed podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Murray, and we are going to be sharing with you a conversation that I had with Apostle Brandon Bailey. But while you're here, do me a favor, please. Can you please subscribe to the channel? If you've already subscribed, like the video and send us a comment below if anything in this conversation really resonates with you. Apostle Brandon Bailey is the founder and senior leader of Teleios Church, a vibrant kingdom community in Johannesburg South. He's also the presiding apostle over the Kingdom Impact Network that oversees and supports pastors and local church communities. He is a self-published author of multiple books through the Teleios Publishing Group, and he has an incredible Teleios community, private community that you can actually sign up for. There's tons of valuable free content that is equipping the saints towards maturity and walking in their God-given call. I'll make sure I put the link for the community in the description. Make sure that you check that out. I promise you it'll help you on your journey. He's also the husband of Pastor Madeline Bailey, as well as they have two incredible kids. That being said, this conversation was absolutely amazing. We got to touch on topics like social justice, intergenerational relationships, how we're meant to be moving in the kingdom of God together. So I'm so excited we get to bring this conversation to you. Enjoy. Apostle, thank you so much for taking the time out to have a seat with us and to be on the New Breed podcast. I'm very excited. I know that you have built so much. And so thank you so much for allowing us and trusting us with your voice. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Kel, for having me on this, your maiden show. I'm particularly excited giving birth to this dream that you've always had. And so it's just an absolute joy for me to be part of what you are building. Thank you.
Man, I appreciate it. I think a good place to start, and maybe it will be stating the obvious, is maybe you can tell me or take me back to when I sent you the invite. And this is a new podcast. You're going to be the first guest. And so there's no previous shows that you can at least, test out to see what it is we stand for. But also, I'm also not a well-known guest or a well-known host. So take me back to the moment. What made you say yes to being on the podcast?
Well, I think I'm always excited with new beginnings. When I see somebody start something, I've always backed that, and I always try to champion the unknown guy, or as they would say, the little guy. And the reason why I said yes to you is because of the offline conversations you had with me. I always tell my wife that when I speak to Kari, does not waste a minute. And you ask me weighty questions, you ask me relevant questions, you ask me things that are meaningful, that carry substance. That made it so easy for me to say I would come onto your platform. Now, I want to say to you that there's a lot of guys that we just don't go to the podcast or to the platforms, or we don't accept certain invitations because the substance of what's out there sometimes can be very disturbing. Your offline conversations gave me an idea of what your online conversations would be. So you've already established a good reputation in terms of how you hold a conversation with me. And there was always a double, and this is why I got so excited when you told me you're finally doing it. I said, yes, I'll come.
Man, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I remember we had gone to a ministry trip with you. And when we were on the trip, one of the young men, one of the evenings you were ministering, got up and ministered. I don't know if you remember this. He ministered an offering segment. And you were so impressed by it. Afterwards, you got up and you affirmed him. And you were like, man, this young man's gifted. The next day, so much so the next day, at breakfast, and this stood out for me, and I want to just maybe give a context for why I'm asking the question. It stood out for me because he came the next day with his pastors, and at breakfast you took like 5 minutes just affirming this young man's gift. You took time to speak into him. And so my question is, I've seen your heart for my generation, for our generation. Is there anything that, or any moment that made that personal for you? Because when you were speaking to him, the way you spoke into his life, you could tell that this come from a personal thing for you. So was there a moment where someone spoke into your life and it was massive for you, so you felt that, oh man, I must give this to the next generation? Or was there another moment where perhaps you never got it and therefore you know what I mean? Why was that so important, and why is your heart so why is it so personal for you?
Let me say this, irrespective of the age, I think when you get to a place where you're comfortable with who you are, then you are never scared to affirm somebody else. And so the first thing you have to understand about affirmation, it reveals personal comfort levels you have with yourself. And you're saying this affirming. It takes me back to when we used to do Monday nights live with Brandon. First 5 minutes of that show, we would recognize other people's work, what they are doing, acknowledge them as they come on. Yeah. And like I said, when you have a level of comfort in knowing who you are, what you bring to the table, what you carry, you are never scared or reluctant to place your hand on somebody else. I affirm people that carry something, and that is important for me. And again, I think one of the challenges an individual have that's just starting out is you have so much doubt, so much fears, so much insecurities, and people don't get to see that. They don't get to hear that. You understand? And so a guy can get onto a stage, do his thing, but by the time he gets off that stage, he's so miserable. Yeah, he has his own fears, doubts, his own insecurities. And so when you can come behind somebody and strengthen them and affirm them, you're encouraging them and you are able to see them grow and become who God wants them to be. And so for me, it's always important that when we affirm people, that they also understand where they are, not just who they are. Because the flip side of affirmation, I've seen people just get carried away because you said something. Yeah, place your hand upon them, you gave them an opportunity, and they immediately get carried away, and you have to say, calm down, man. So again, the outcome and the results of such a thing can be very different. Yeah. But the idea again is to always minister to people so that they can be confident in what they do. And for some reason, God has always brought me into the company of people who battle those things. And it's always been important for me to place my hand upon them, encourage them, and let them know they are able to do and they are able to go to the next level. Now, to come back to your question about being a young man, remember years ago, many, many years ago, there was a particular preacher in our nation that was coming up. I was a youth worker at the time. I was so impressed with this guy. I mean, the guy ministered extremely well. I'm a word guy. Yeah, I remember he had some prayer meetings close by to our area, and I would go to those midweek meetings, teaching Bible study prayer meetings, just to attend. Yeah. So the one day, I'm coming out, I had to go get something in the car, and I walk into this guy. Excited, obviously, because I'm now seeing him up close. And I went to greet him, but he was so not interested, in just greeting a young guy that's impressed with him. I don't want to talk to him or anything. I just wanted to greet him because he's the guy. We just have walking to each other. And I made a vow that particular day that I would never do that to another person because that moment made me feel so insignificant, like so small. And said, may I never do that the day God's hand is upon my life. So it also goes back to that particular incident. This is one of the reasons why I always back what I see God doing in someone's life.
Yeah, I think that's so important because something that I often thought, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about it, is in the book of Acts, you see when Paul and I believe it's Silas go to the apostles and they speak and their conversation was about what doctrine should go back to the churches that they were coming. Should they, obey the law? Should they Acts 15, right? And so when they go back, the things that were required of the church to obey were actually very limited. It was, it had to do with sexual purity. It had to do with, they were very limited things. My concern is often for our generation, we're ready to run, Apostle. Like we want to, we want to make the content, we want to build a business. There's something in us that wants to keep moving. And then what I've found is a lot of the times there's so much extra traditional things that can be put on us that aren't necessarily, necessary or essentials of the gospel that can sometimes weigh us down in us wanting to run. And I've often thought that it's so important for us for y'all as fathers, for us to have relationships with fathers who in our running can correct us and can speak into us. And I don't know, what's your thoughts on that, maybe the relationship us as a generation need to be having with our fathers and leaders? And because we see so many of us just wanting to do stuff and then we don't have the relational connection to fathers to kind of ground us. How important do you think that relationship is? Because I see that as something necessary for our generation.
Well, one of the things you have to understand about life is that generally people are territorial. You have a young man coming up, he wants to gain territory. You have an older guy that already has territory, he wants to protect territory. And so what happens in those instances, you are setting yourself up for conflict because the one wants territory, the other one wants to protect territory. And that is what generally fosters the type of conflict that you see between these two generations. Now, one of the things we have to understand is that you can be a maverick, do your own thing just for so long, and then eventually the rules of the game will catch up with you. Now, let me explain.
Okay. Yeah. Break it down to us.
There was a playing somewhere once, and I watched this documentary, and I would recommend it people watch it. It's called Jurassic Park, Jurassic Park,
Okay.
and the documentary is based on a guy that was extreme. I mean, this guy was brilliant, and so he was in special effects. He was responsible for the special effects in Jurassic Park and most of the movies that you see. But the guy was just cutting edge. He was way ahead of the game. But the problem with the guy was that he did not respect rules. So what had happened initially, they would give him the leverage and they would let him run to come up with the brilliant ideas that he wanted to come up with. And he did. And those things became a massive success. But what he missed was that there were certain governing rules that govern the space, that govern the industry, and so on and so forth. And even though they gave him the liberty to just have carte blanche and do what he wants to do, they also tried to make him aware of certain boundaries that governs the space.
Okay.
But he was so arrogant in his creativity that he began to ignore those boundaries. And when you watch the documentary, the guy then eventually succumbs to alcoholism, and the brilliance that could be was missed in another generation. You understand what I'm saying? So what I'm saying is that for a generation, there must be innovation, there must be that enthusiasm, there must be that drive to do what God has called you to do. But you cannot be ignorant of the rules that govern certain spaces, because most of the time we ignore the rules that govern spaces because we're so cutting edge. We don't understand how to fuse and establish a healthy synergy between the two. So here you had a guy with tremendous potential and power, but just because he could care less about the rules that govern the space, he has an opportunity. So what I'm saying is that I'm not against the idea of a generation pushing themselves the way they push themselves, but I become concerned when their generation does not heed to certain caution from people that has been there. Caution is always to help the innovator. You understand what I'm saying? But again, when you are so enthusiastic, you must interpret all forms of guidance and help. And one of the mistakes that the younger generation make, I made this mistake as well when I was much younger. We think everybody that wants us is intimidated or threatened by us. And only to discover years later, the guy that you said was intimidated or threatened by you, he's still running, he's still standing. You just fell on the wayside. So once we overcome the arrogant notion that people are threatened by us, we'll actually discover that no, that's not the case. Somebody's just giving us caution, because people will always warn you not to fall where they fell.
And I think the old adage is that the wise man learns from others' mistakes,
Yeah. So to come back to your point, that generational relationship is important.
Yeah.
Their connectivity is important. The ability to listen is important. Because when we older guys, and I enjoy being with guys that are over there, I enjoy conversations with men that are in their 60s. For them, it's been there, done that. There's nothing to achieve, there's nothing to prove, there's nothing to do again. And so you're in a safe space because you're not with somebody that still wants to prove something. You're with somebody that's proven so much already. He could care less about what he tells you, what he gives you, and where he's headed. When he gets out, his legacy is established forever. And those type of spaces are very safe spaces. So if I would give counsel to a generation, I would say, be innovative, be the maverick that you are, but do not forget that spaces are governed by rules. And most of the time, when a space rejects you, it is not because of your brilliance, it's because of your carelessness. I'll say that again. Spaces that reject people for brilliance.
Yeah.
Spaces reject people for their carelessness. And that is what we have to understand and reconcile ourselves.
I think for me, something I've been thinking a lot about is that for South Africa, I believe the most powerful sleeping giant of change for common good is the church. I think, like, for me, and when I say the church, I'm saying the collective body of believers within, South Africa. I feel that's the most powerful agent for change and social good, economic good, and what have you. My question is, and I don't know if you want to weigh in that on that as well. Maybe your thoughts around that. But for, let's say there's somebody who is watching this now and they're maybe a bit hesitant, questioning whether they should move ahead with the project or move ahead with and I'm also sitting because I wanna glean from that as well, this being the first project. So how would you encourage them to step boldly forward, because I think sometimes we can look at the seed and think that it's nothing or it's too little. How would you encourage someone off the ledge of maybe uncertainty or maybe questioning?
For us to move at the speed of instruction, because if you don't move at the speed of the instruction, you will play catch up with your dreams all the time. And what I mean by that is you move when God tells you to move. You do what God tells you to do. And when I say move, I talk about a project, an idea, concept that God gives you. Because the thing that people don't understand is that ideas also belongs to an open window. Did you understand what I mean? And so if you delay it, you miss that window. But what people also fail to understand is that ideas belong to a generation. And what I mean by that, if God gives you an idea and you are procrastinating, you will look across the street and somebody else will birth what you procrastinated with. And I often meet people that said, it was my idea. I had that idea. They stole my idea. Nobody stole your idea. Procrastination caused the idea to move on to somebody else because ideas belongs to a generation. And most people don't understand it when God releases ideas, concepts, and projects, as you would put it. If you are disobedient and you don't move at the speed of an instruction, somebody else will emerge. And that is what the Esther was trying to explain to us. Her uncle says to her, the Lord raised you for this particular time. But if you neglect obedience in this particular time, help will arise from another place, because the help was for a generation, not necessarily just an individual that's a custodian or a steward of that thing. And this is what people oftentimes miss. So when you look at life, there is really how these things work. That's why you notice in any generation, you have multiple of the same type of giftings or the same type of initiatives. Let's go to the US and got briefly the civil rights movement. The idea of breaking free from the oppression during that particular period belonged to that generation. This is why you didn't just have Martin Luther King, but you also had Malcolm X. Because the grace was released upon a generation, and whoever was willing to catch that mantle then became the steward in that particular generation. We see the same is true with South Africa. We had Nelson Mandela, but we did not just have Nelson Mandela. We had Robert Sobukwe. You understand what I'm saying? Two guys with completely different ways of reasoning, looking at things, thinking at things, but the objective, the project, the agenda is just one. Bring freedom to the people. So you notice mantles and graces are released over an entire generation. And so if you don't move at the speed of an instruction, somebody else will emerge with the same idea, same concept, the same vantage point, and you will see them push that thing. So if you don't move at the speed of the idea, God does not abandon the project. He just passes it on.
I think that's so strong. So every idea belongs to a generation, and every idea belongs to a window. Ah, man, that's so good. That's so good. I just want us to just sit in that a bit. I think
Answer to Jesus. A lot of people think that it was only the disciples of Jesus that was doing work. What these disciples come to me and they say, we see a man down there doing the work as well.
Come on.
And then Jesus says, and they say to Jesus, do we stop him? Jesus says, no. If he's not against us, he's for us. Let that guy just run and just let him mind his business. And that is so profound that window was open to anybody that wanted to participate in it. So procrastination really does not cause God to abandon the project for the people. It just causes him to pass it on to somebody that will move at the speed of an instruction.
Man, that's so good. I think also so much of it has to do with how much you've grown. I remember the ones you shared. You said that, and every time I go onto a plane. So you said when you go onto the plane, nobody can take your seat. When the seat is there, it's there. And you just need to make sure that you arrive on time. You just need to make sure that you arrive on time. And I think that's so much of what you're saying here. Because
your arrival plan is important. And this is what people don't understand. Now you see a lot of people have this thing that is, if God gave it to you, it's yours. That's not entirely true. Because God gave the kingdom to Saul, but God also took the kingdom from Saul. Now our generation will say, if it is yours, it's yours.
Yeah.
God gave the kingdom to Saul and also took the kingdom from Saul. So one of the things you have to understand is that the scope of stewardship requires continuous obedience. I think there's not the continuity of obedience. Somebody else will emerge and they will reap a harvest where you have labored. This is why Jesus says to the nation of Israel, you will reap where you have not sown, because the opportunity was given to people, but a harvest was given to another people because they could not steer it the way we discussing it here today.
Sure. I think also when we're speaking about just a moment or generation and a time frame, I think that also has to do so much with how much we are, how much what we carry is being revealed within that context, within that time. Something that you taught once at one of your schools of ministry was we make God relevant by how we manifest Him authentically within our generation. It's like the church has been there for so many 2,000 years because each generation has a people that rises up within their generation, within their context.
And I recently did a teaching when I was in Richmond in the USA. The teaching that I spoke on was a precedent, a Precedent, a precedent. And one of the things you have to understand is that, come back to your idea of relevance and how every generation emerges. The Bible says that John the Baptist will come, but he will come in the spirit of Elijah. Now, what happened is that Elijah was not living in the time of John. He was not relevant to that time, but the mantle then was manifested in that particular generation through John, which means every generation functions on a precedent. Now, in order for us to know that John the Baptist was an accurate representation of the purposes of God, we have a historical reference that we can reconcile it to. One of the things we have to understand, the methodology might change in a particular generation, the way they present it might change in a particular generation, but can we reconcile it to a precedent? This is why on the day of Pentecost, Peter gets up and Peter says, what you are witnessing now, this is that it was prophesied by the prophet of Joel. And we see the same thing with Jesus Christ, a priest forever, how? Order of Melchizedek. So every generation is relevant to that time. Change the methodology, change the output, might do things slightly different. Yeah. But if we can reconcile it to a precedent, then we know whatever expression is emerging in the earth is a safe expression. Reason why one functions on precedent is so that the expressions can be safe. In a generation can find solace in that particular expression. So yes, you must emerge as a voice in your generation, but is there continuity from another generation, and can we reconcile what Kyle is producing with what was produced before him? And when we are able to trace that, then we understand the safety of what is emerging in the earth.
Wow.
Because not safe, just pursuing your own ambition. You are just doing your own thing and you are disconnected from the larger body of believers. So everything in the earth functions on a precedent. I normally put it like this to the guys back home. I say to them, you become to your generation who somebody else was to his generation.
Sure.
That is basically
that's good.
Phrase it. You become to your generation.
That's good.
What somebody else was to his generation. John became to his generation what Elijah was to his generation. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And that is how we have to look at it, because we must function from a precedent.
Sure. I think in our generation, we're finding that we are, at least my generation, is so socially conscious. There's an innate belief towards social, not even just social, but towards justice. And I don't know if it has to do with the amount of, once we got the internet, we got so bombarded with so much of the ills of the world that we began to kind of calibrate towards that. And so deep inside of us, there's a sense of justice, that all things must be. Maybe running ahead of myself here, but I love how you say that you must be for your generation. what another was to their generation. And so my question is this: in the pre-1994 era of the church, there were so many voices who came up, outside of the church, and those people were, they were wired towards justice, and they were wired towards speaking out against the apartheid and governments and what have you. My favorite story is the story of in Cape Town, when there was a protest. I think it was in 1980s. There was this protest that happened where they were spraying purple dye on all of the protesters, and so they could identify which ones they could take, which ones could be arrested afterwards. And then about 11 days later, Archbishop Desmond Tutu led a protest as well, against the apartheid government. My question is this: in the history or the inheritance of the faith that we have as a generation is one that has not been detached from the culture, is one that has not been detached from the national interests of our nation. How do you feel that we should be, as our generation, engaging with what's currently happening culturally, politically? It's just, I think we don't want to be detached, but we also need some guidance on how do we engage with this.
First statement you made, you said our generation is geared towards justice. Let me just pause there for a moment. Okay, first thing we have to understand, we live in a day and age where you have to be so cautious with who champions people's pain.
Oof.
You have to be extremely cautious with who champions people's pain. And what I mean by that is the social media era has given us content or relevance. And so anytime I see you more upset about an incident than the person that the incident happened, then I become concerned. I'm concerned because it now begins to expose your motives, that you are the champion of somebody's pain because it keeps you relevant in a conversation that the person or the victim have already walked away from. You understand? When we speak about justice, we have to be very cautious, particularly in our day and age, we're the champions of people's pain. Because everybody sees it as content for their next great moment. So you have people that are championing your cause, but they are really just establishing and building their brand.
Sure.
You're gonna have
Okay.
to be cautious when we talk about the champions of pain. And unfortunately, in the social media era, we have produced so many champions of pain that long after the victims have walked away from something, they are still advocating for it because it keeps them relevant and it keeps them current in a conversation that only have monetary value for them, buys them sympathy and buys them attention. Now, when you draw parallels between this generation and their generation, the champions of pain was not advocating for personal visibility because personal visibility did not carry monetary value.
Sure. Yeah. That's such an important distinction we're making.
There was no YouTube paying for views. There was no Facebook paying for likes. There was no Twitter paying for hits. And so there was a level of authenticity and purity that governed the champions of pain.
Okay.
The champions of pain today is a very tricky one because it carries a certain value that can build a brand. And this is why you would notice that even when people are championing a cause, they are enemies, but they are fighting for the same thing. Because it's who arrives first on the scene.
Sure.
It was the first
man.
So you have to be cautious with the champions of pain. Judas was the champion of pain when the lady brought the alabaster box to Jesus. She breaks it, she gives it to Jesus, and he says, why are we not fighting for the poor in this particular moment? He became a champion of pain. But it had absolutely nothing to do with him. The person that he and moved on from that moment, but he stayed in that moment and he became the default champion of pain. So when we talk about social justice, there must be scrutiny as far as the champions of pain are concerned. And that has been something that I've been extremely cautious with because I understand how the pendulum swings and whoever's first on the scene can brand a moment and it can catapult them into a form of stardom. And we then begin to pay the price later when that thing begins to unravel and begins to unfold. Now, to come back to the second part of your question concerning social justice, There are many avenues and many platforms where we can contend and fight for justice, at least at one level or the other. And I think within our own personal context, we must make our voice known. We must make our voice known. If you have a platform, make your voice known. Weigh in on it. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Make your voice known. Make the necessary noise. And also, the second thing is don't try to recreate the fight. We have to learn to align our efforts. If I find you already fighting gangsterism, there's no need for me to start a second movement that's going to fight gangsterism. I can just align my efforts with you. And that then begins to reveal to us the purity of the hearts of those that are champions.
My word.
So the champions of pain is something we have to be extremely cautious, particularly in this day and age. I've seen people move on, forgive, let go, over and done with a situation, but people will still advocate for that. Still fight for that. People will still make a big deal about it. People will still go on and on because there is value on them in the sense of relevance, money, attention, sympathy.
What's up, family? I hope that you are enjoying this conversation with Apostle Brandon. We want to produce content that is actually helpful. So please do me a favor. Drop a comment below if anything in this conversation might bring up any questions you may have, any thoughts that you have, or you have suggestions on the kind of content that you want to see that will actually be helpful where you are right now. That's really important for us. And so please do drop a comment and let us know if you have any questions or if there's anything that you are particularly struggling with in your journey as you walk out the purpose of God, as you are navigating culture. Let us know, and we will be very intentional about producing content that actually speaks to that. All right, let's get back into it. Sometimes the culture that's surrounding us can so many times shape the culture that's inside of us.
Yes.
And I think that's so, as believers and as ambassadors of the kingdom, we need to be cautious of that.
Yeah. You have to overcome your desire to participate. And unfortunately, social media is bait that invites you to participate in every conversation that's going on. You won't even realize that you're weighing in on absolutely everything. And that means you're out of control. You have no self-control because you just weigh in on any random conversation. Somebody puts something out about the blood of Jesus, you are weighing in. Somebody puts out something about racism, you are weighing in. Somebody puts out something about soccer, you are weighing in. And you don't realize that your mind is all over the place. You are scattered as an individual. So the desire to weigh in is something you will have to overcome. Because at some stage you will be exposed as a person that just wants to be relevant but really don't have the substance for the conversation. So a desire to participate. And unfortunately, social media is a continuous cycle of participation. It is so difficult to scroll and not say something.
That's so true. And if it's not this, then there's another thing. There's another thing.
And it just keeps you there. And you remain in that rat race for a very long time. Their ultimately girl is the struggle that we have. And people will put out controversy because controversy pays the bills. Controversy pays the bills. So if I'm not going to be controversial, how am I going to get to the next place? I had a friend, and I'll share this with you quickly, just to expound on the idea of controversy. So we grew up together. Brilliant guy. Brilliant guy. I won't mention his name, but a brilliant guy. So we would sit like this and we would have conversations. And I just loved his mind on certain things. But when this guy would speak, people would not pay attention to it. They would dismiss him as irrelevant. They would dismiss him as somebody that thinks he's something special. You always want to be smart. They would just dismiss him. Then this guy created a character. You understand? And he created a page, and this character communicated the same ideas and the same thoughts in a humorous way, in a silly way. And he started gravitating towards him. And I looked at it. It was like he literally had to invent a persona for people to understand the substance. Same. And that to me made me realize that unless we become controversial, our ideas will not be heard. And we then succumb and give into the temptation to become controversial because we simply want to be heard. Now, he has gone on and he has achieved quite a lot of things based on this persona that he created. But my question is, why can we not have a culture where you hear me as myself and not as the persona that you find relatable? The shallowness of the culture.
Sure.
Because if I can't hear Carl unless he's dressed up in a particular way, then there's a problem with me. It's not a problem with Carl. And so what we do is we adapt to the shallowness of the culture instead of inviting the culture up high.
And in a situation like this where we are starting this podcast because we want to have weighty conversations, these are intricate conversations, these are important conversations for where we are. Do you think that the way to not just be controversial for controversial, but to get our ideas and the thoughts of our guests and what God is doing, do you think that we can do that just based off of putting consistently good content out? We don't need controversy. So how would you weigh in on that?
So every conversation attracts an audience.
Okay.
Every conversation attracts an audience. Your conversation will determine who's your audience. And if you're in love with a particular audience, then your conversation is going to take on the identity of that audience. So what I'm saying to you is, would you rather preserve and protect who you are? Or will you change so that you can have the numbers and sell the narrative of success? Is what I'm saying to you. Is build it the way God told you to build it. Have that conversation, because those that God has assigned to your voice eventually come. But the problem is, we don't really care about who's in the crowd. We just care about how big the crowd is. We're a generation that don't care about who's in the crowd. We care about how big
that the crowd is.
You will achieve more in a room with 10 individuals that carry weight than you will achieve in a stadium with 10,000 people that can't move your ideas to the next level and fund your ideas. So there must be a shift in your thinking.
Yeah.
Who's in the crowd is more important than the size of the crowd. Because when you meet with investors, you're not meeting in a stadium, you're meeting in a boardroom. You understand what I'm saying? When you meet with investors, you're not meeting
so good. Yeah, that's so good.
In a boardroom. And most likely there's no more than 10 individuals in that room. And this is what people eventually discover. I mean, I look at the past election. Stadiums were packed out. Stadiums were packed out. You had parties that had rallies, and those rallies were massive.
Yeah.
But when we got to the elections, the results said a completely different thing.
Yeah.
Because it's not really the size of the crowd. It's who's in the crowd. And when there's people that's going to move you, those are closed-door meetings. Those are not stadium meetings. So the choice is ultimately yours. You want popularity or do you want impact?
I think also so much of that has to do with the maturity of us as believers, and that's something that comes out in everything that you do is maturing the saints. Maybe if I could phrase this question a bit differently, and you can relate it to everything we've spoken about, how as you see is relevant. But what do you think are the dangers of immaturity? Because we see at least I think, and you can correct me, that so much of this not being baited into the wrong conversations, making sure that we need to, like, all of these conversations we're having, so much around it has to do with the maturity of the believer in how we're moving forward in what God's called us to be.
Immature people are very impulsive. They act in the moment, they speak in the moment, they do in the moment. Mature people allow the dust to settle. They look at things, they wait for things to play out. And then when everything played out, you will get a response from them, or you will get them to wait in on it. Immature people are very impulsive. They speak without having their ducks in the row. They speak without having context. They speak without understanding the facts. They just the type of people that make noise because they want to be heard. A mature person, on the other hand, will observe the entire situation and he will allow it to play out. And then when the time is right, he will decide, do I say something about this or do I just let it slide? Because at the end of the day, you have to understand the dangers of being impulsive. Because when you're impulsive, you always walk away with regret later. Now here's the thing. Immature people invite you to act in the moment. They invite you to act in the moment. They invite you to say something in the moment. And let me say this to you, when we're angry, when we are thrown a little bit off balance, our actions are always stupid. Yeah, our actions are always stupid.
Yeah.
But the problem is because that is the narrative you have created, you have to preserve and sustain that narrative. So even when you come to your senses, you can't go back because that was the narrative you perpetuated. Understand what I'm saying? So now you're embarrassed because you realize, you know what? I did not know and all my facts together. I didn't really look at this thing constructively. So the difference is the one is calculated, the other one is impulsive. I must say something now. I must do something now. I must voice my opinion now. I must show them now what I'm about. But mature person will sit back, will look at a situation, will allow the dust to settle, and will then say, do I weigh in or do I just let it slide? And that really is the difference between, in this generation, the difference between your matured and your immature crowd. Because the truth is, when moments and things just happen, we don't really have the background story. We don't.
That's true.
We just know that happened to Kyle. This is the incident. We don't have the background story. And because you don't have the background story, you end up missing so much of it, and your opinion becomes misplaced in that moment. So the idea of maturing the saints is so that you can be a thinker, so that you can apply yourself well, so that you can apply yourself constructively, and so that the outcome or the conclusion that you draw might be something accurate. And that is why we have to be matured in situations. I cannot say that more than what I've already done. That is really to answer your question. Between your mature audience and your immature audience.
And I think in that moment, I think when you are impulsive or you're just jumping into conversations and what have you, there can be collateral damage that happens that you don't even realize in the moment. But then afterwards you realize, now we see you different. Now you can't correctly be an ambassador for the kingdom or for God. You can't present yourself as a representative of him, because now in that impulsive moment we see you as
one of the things you're never going to get out of Christians is I miscalculated the situation. Christian. Very few Christians will come and say I miscalculated the situation. I overestimated my input or my weight in the situation. Because when the damage is done, it's done. And I've dealt with Christians that miscalculated their input, overestimated their weight in a situation. Things that had absolutely nothing to do with them, where they didn't have the authority or the standing to have certain conversations. And when they suffer the consequences, the repercussions of that misplaced importance, they begin to play the victim card. And it comes back to what you say. Now you can't come back and say, hey, I seriously overestimated my weight here. Or I miscalculated myself here. I had a very misconstrued notion about everything. Because one of the things you eventually discover in life is that you're not always as weighty as you thought you were. What I'm saying? Always as weighty as you thought you were. So a matured person will sit down and count the cost. Like people bring things to me. I give you an example. People bring stuff. They would say, do you want to weigh in on this? And I sometimes respond with, I have nothing to say. You have to say something. And I would respond with, I have no relationship with those people. They don't know me. And they don't value my voice the way you value my voice. So even if I write a thesis on the situation, they would not care what I have to say because I don't matter to them. And that doesn't mean that I'm downplaying myself. It just means that I understand who I am in certain stories.
Exactly.
And that's a story where I'm not scripted in. And I understand that. Now we think because we value people's voices, those voices carry the same value everywhere. You might value my voice, but the value of my voice is not at that level in other rooms. And that is important for us to reconcile in our hearts. If we don't reconcile that in our hearts, we will overplay our situations.
Sure. And I think that's something that's so important, because I wish I could take what you just said and just amplify it for more believers, especially online. And it seems like a lot of our conversation is leaning in that direction, because you'll find somebody says something, that maybe someone doesn't agree with, and they would write this thesis in the comment section. You don't know the person, you have nothing to do with that person. And I'm saying this because this is normal in our in our culture.
I once said to me, I don't agree with you. So I asked the person, I said, so what do you want me to do? To review all my work over the years, all my thoughts, all the work that I've put out because you didn't agree with it, and I must write a book because Kyle disagreed with me. I've changed my views. And I said to the person, you don't get that. Now, they called me arrogant, they dismissed me as being arrogant. But the truth is, when you disagree with me, that doesn't mean I'm going to change everything about me because you disagree. You don't carry so much weight. And one of the things that anchors us in humility is to understand that we're not that weighty.
Yeah.
I make it a point when people come to me with certain situations, I will look at it and I would say, these people don't know me. They don't care about my voice. So even if I write the beautiful pieces for you on this matter, it will go nowhere. You will laugh because you value my voice. They don't even know my voice. I don't even exist in that world. And that helps us to be anchored in humility and to contribute our voices based on value.
Yeah.
Because if you just throw your voice out anywhere, you're going to miss it. And Jesus taught us this principle. He said, do not cast your pearls to swines. Now, we can have many angles on that particular scripture. But if we have to put that in contemporary terms, Jesus was simply saying, don't lend your voice to spaces that don't value your voice the way you value it. That's literally what it meant. Don't lend your voice to spaces that don't value your voice the way you value your voice. And let me tell you something. It is not because people lack discernment. Because normally when people don't value our voice the way we value it, we pull the discernment card because we can't discern. No, it's not discernment. You're just not that important. You get what I'm saying? Because when people don't respond to it, they lack discernment. It's not a lack of discernment.
I don't know you.
Darren, just say, just not that important. Do discernment with a prayer life without it passed out is it? You're just not that important. There's nothing to do with discernment.
Yo.
I don't going to say that I'm arrogant, but I'm just trying to answer and give context.
Yeah.
That's the accusation. That's not that. I do that for myself.
Yeah.
I know the rooms where they don't know me. And,
Yeah.
and I always enter a room with a spirit of humility. I mean, you've known me for years. I'm coming to a room and steal the room. I keep quiet until I'm asked to say something. You've known me for years.
Yeah. I think, and the reason I'm saying that is because, and the reason that's so relevant is because I've seen so much of that. I think circling back to something that we started, because as someone that's building and that's coming into maybe a more public, public ministry or public content creation and what have you, I think one of my concerns, because I see some people, when I listen to them, I'm thinking that sounds sound. Like that's something I would say. But then when I look at the comment section, there's like 30 other people. And my thing is like, I have no idea the doctrine of those 30 comments. I don't know what those people believe. I know this person, at least on social media. And so then you're in a situation where you are discrediting somebody who's putting out content and who's actually on the field playing and doing something. Then you get 30 people trying to discredit them. And I look at you don't have one post out. You don't. So my question is, maybe circling back, how important is it for us as doing the work of God, that we're not paying attention to the crowd and everything the crowd is saying, versus having a father who's able to call you and tell you, nah, my guy, change what you said, or you know what I mean? Is that tension?
He responds to them, but yes, this is the first thing. The greatest compliments I've received in my life for my work, whether that's my schools, my books, whatever I put out, the greatest compliments I've received came from the most seasoned of voices. What I mean by that, it's men that have been there, done that. They give me such tremendous feedback, such good feedback, so many compliments for what I do. The worst and the most ugly critique I've received comes from novices that have not done anything. They would come for me. They would insult me. They would downplay my work. They would downplay my efforts. And I would always draw a parallel between these two. And I always say, seasoned voices recognize my work that I've put out. Novices that have not done half of what I've done, they are the most vocal in terms of criticizing me. And that is when I learned one fundamental truth, that when you are inexperienced, you know so little, but you don't know how little you know, that the amount of how minuscule your knowledge is, that you just build an opinion on that little. You understand? Yeah, guys. On the other hand, they have put in the work. We're talking about 40 years of work, 30 years of work. They understand the sacrifice and the price of building that thing. And this is why they're cautious with their critique, because they know what it takes. The inexperienced don't know what it takes. The experienced know what it takes. So the greatest compliments I've received came from men that have done years of work. But when you look at my critics, they have not even done half of what I've done. And so the novice is extremely vocal, but a seasoned voice is extremely slow, cautious, quiet, and paced. And understand when to say something and what to say. And that is something you're going to battle the entirety of your life. The critique of a novice versus the compliments of a seasoned man. If you look at your own life, the people that encourage you the most to build this platform and to run with this podcast, the seasoned voices. The people that warned you the most, that was the most critical of podcasts and what you have to do, it's novices. It's like, you've not done anything, bruh. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's true.
It's true. Is the dynamics of what we have to do. Now, to come back to the second part of what you said, in terms of shutting out the noise and focusing on what we have to do.
Yeah.
One of the things you have to understand, people that love you will always speak to you privately. People that love you will always speak to you privately. People that don't love you, that are building their own brand, will always speak to you publicly, shun you publicly, call you to order publicly, make noise about you publicly. And that is the difference between love and people that are building a brand. I've never had people that love me speak to me in a public space, but I've always had them call me, speak to me offline, correct me. Correct me. Tell me, I don't agree with your thoughts there. You're going to have to review your theology here. And it's beautiful conversations. But those that don't know, that have no relationship, we always try to do that in a public space. And that is the difference between public noise and love. You understand what I'm saying? Because people that love will always speak you offline because they're not trying to prove to anybody anything. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
They're not trying to prove something. There's a genuine concern for you. So they would pull you aside and speak to you. But if they try and prove to everybody something, they're going to come for you in that public space. So you're going to have to learn to shut out the noise and to listen to people that actually want to see you win. People that actually want to see you win. And you will know people that want to see you win by how they champion you, how they support you, and how they help you. And again, people love the idea of constructive criticism and stuff. But I've also realized that sometimes there is just people hiding behind their own nonsense and calling it constructive criticism in the end of the day.
Masquerading it.
So come back to your point is, the greatest compliments you'll receive in life will come from seasoned people. Your worst critique will come from novices.
I also think because it seems like in our culture now, the commentary box has become the biggest seat in the auditorium. Like where people are, just have commentary on the ones that are playing the game, who are actually doing what God's called them to do, who are actually putting out content, who are actually building businesses or what have you. That so many times the biggest box now has become the commentary box. Something that I said in the episode before this, which was us, just introducing the hearts of the podcast. One of the things I said is that this is a way for us to also try and mobilize our generation, that we don't need more people in the commentary box. We need to be on the field,
So let me put it this way. You either have a message or you have a message about a message.
That's so good.
You have Jesus emerging in the earth. I like to use Bible.
Yeah.
Jesus emerging in the earth. Jesus is a messenger. The Pharisees forgot their message and they started having messages on the messenger. Because sometimes nobody listens to you, and so the only relevance you have in the conversation is the name of somebody they listen to. Do you understand? And so Nobody listens to Brandon, but they listen to Kyle. And because they listen to Kyle, Brandon is going to use Kyle's name to buy his seat at the table. And that is unfortunately what we are dealing with. When you go and you put on a platform like YouTube, you have so many content creators. What is your message? You have a message. What is your mission?
I don't know mission.
What is your mandate? I don't have a mandate. Then you discover that the only thing they do is they speak about the people that are actually putting out the work. So if you don't have a message, you start talking about a messenger. And that is how people maintain their relevance. There are certain people, nobody would listen to them until they say somebody's name. Like nobody care who they are until they say somebody's name.
Until they put them on the thumbnail.
And that is the unfortunate situation that we deal with. I mean, you have to ask, like, who's this guy? No, he was the guy that spoke about Kyle. Now he becomes relevant in the conversation. So you're going to have to ask yourself, you got to really give me a message, or am I just having something on the messenger? And this is why you see the shift that you highlighted, where the comment segment has become bigger than the actual content that's being put out, because there is the culture where you have nothing to say, you're going to say something about somebody.
I think that's why it was always important when I think of Jesus, how many times we saw when the crowd began to gather, when the crowd began to stir, Jesus then gets away.
Don't trust the crowd.
Oh, sure.
One of the things you will have to learn is don't trust the crowd. I left social media, I think on Facebook, 40,000 followers. So many people said, man, you have so many followers. Why would you leave social media? You have so many followers, you have so many. And the constant nagging sound was, you have so many followers. And I said to the guys, I said this to them, I said, if I can't walk away from 40,000 followers, then that followers have become the idol that I worship. Then that 40,000 followers become the idol that Brandon Bailey worship. And so one of the things that's going to be key is for you to understand that you cannot trust the crowd, and it is not a crowd that makes you, it is God that makes you. It is God that makes you. And that is a lesson for every Christian content creator.
I think one of the things that I want to say, you wrote a piece on Christian content creators.
Yeah.
That I thought was really profound. Because there was this article that you wrote on Facebook that was published by Teleios, and the article said that that the church is governed, or to speak is governed by God-given authority. That there's a framework that you speak from. You don't just speak. The reason I'm saying this is important, we're finding more people, starting podcasts. And that's why I was so happy that you came on, because you are a voice that I'm submitted to. Like you my apostle. And so it's like, I'm not just coming out and, doing my own thing. How important do you think is it for content creators, podcasters, YouTubers, or whatever it is they do? How important do you think it is for them to be functioning from this structure which is being commissioned by the church, whether it is submission to voices, fathers, but they're not just doing stuff on their own?
So the difference between authority and audacity. Authority is given. God gives you authority. Even in the workplace, authority is given. A manager, a department head, a HR will give you the authority to say, we appoint you into this position. You can act on it. Authority is given. Audacity is just an assumption we make about the value of our opinion. And so what I mean by that is somebody can say, oh, that's good. I had the audacity to say that. He just placed his voice at a certain level, and he just had the audacity to say something. But he was not authorized to say that, you understand? And we must make a distinction between authority and audacity, number one. And so a whole lot of people in these spaces might not necessarily have a given authority, but they will function in the audacity to say something and the audacity to speak, you understand? And that is something that we must understand, the difference.
Yeah.
And the audacity to speak. If I come into your house, and you say to your son, you go to bed now, it's 8 o'clock. You have the authority to speak in that house, and that boy will go to bed. It's 8 o'clock. If I'm visiting you and I'm just your friend and I'm visiting you and I say to you, to your son, you go to bed now, it's 8 o'clock. You will look at your wife and you would say, audacity does this man have to speak in my house the way he does? Because I assume certain things, but it is not given to me. So there is a distinction we must make. And for us, in order to be safe in these spaces, we must understand who has the authority to speak and who just speaks because they have the audacity to speak. Now, when it comes to social media, we also need to be careful at the church that we don't always look at that through an apostolic send type of dimension lens.
Okay.
That space is created for people to speak. And if people want to speak and want to be heard, let them speak. Because we can't control everything people's gonna do and people's gonna say. My philosophy is very simple. That if you're gonna bite off that, you must be willing to chew it, because to have conversations at a certain level, there's repercussions at a certain level. So my ideology and philosophy has always been, if he wants to weigh in, let him weigh in. Let him suffer the consequences of weighing in. So we need to get to a place where we don't try to rescue the opinionated. Let them suffer the fate of their opinion. That is really how I'm approaching, because I know not everybody functions from the same dimension. But let them suffer the fate of their bravery. And that is really been how I. That's what happened to the 7 sons of Sceva. The church is the church. What people miss about the 7 sons of Sceva is that they were doing that for a while and the church did not accept it. In this way it says, and there was certain itinerant exorcists going around. That's how the scripture puts it. So it uses the word itinerant exorcist, which means they were going about driving out demons, demons.
Yeah.
What we miss is that the church did not stop that.
Sure.
Because the church wanted them to suffer the consequences of their bravery. And one of the things that I'm learning, if people are brave enough to do it, let them run with it. Let them run with it. Don't intercept them. Don't stop them. Don't change them. Don't give your views on it. Don't weigh in strong on it. Let them run with it. And let them suffer the fate of what they believe they were called to do. And that's been my approach to it. So I don't stop people from doing what they want to do. Do your knee talk, my friend. Do it. You understand? But
You suffer
people
the.
have that
Yeah.
It's like, go on the radio window. And one guy went on the radio window. He was not ready for it. He went on the interview. He spoke nonsense. Man, they came. And he said, oh, you were attacking me. And I realized you were suffering the fate of your bravery.
Sure.
So the sons of Sceva, nobody intercepted him. The church didn't put a body or a commission together to weigh what they were doing. The church just let it run.
You know, I'm laughing because suffering the consequence of your bravery is such a wild statement. Like, it's such a crazy statement. You have to suffer the consequences of your bravery. Yeah, it's true. I'm saying it's such a good way to put it.
So the sons of Sceva was not stopped. Even when
the
New Testament church rose in that council, and they were trying to put a council to get it to control what was coming up. The man says, a wise man, Gamaliel, arose. And Gamaliel said, let's not stop this man. And then he mentions 2 guys. He says there was Judas, this guy, and there was this other guy. And he was able to persuade 400 men to go with him. What was their fate? And he says the other one also persuaded a few people, made a noise for a while. What was his fate? And then he said, let us not do the same with these men. Because if it is not of God, coming back to my statement, they will suffer the consequences. Their bravery. But if he's from God, this thing will be fruitful, it will run and it will go on. So the
So good.
was where we actually saw
So good.
Please don't give us that wisdom. Let them suffer the consequences of their bravery if it is not of God. If it is of God, we will have a different conversation. So I love the fact that in the Bible we don't see councils emerging to control and to suppress. We just see a church. We see different councils, different bodies, just letting people have the liberty to do what they think they're called to do and let them deal with it. Because trust me, my friend, when that smoke comes, you're
maybe as we just start to land the plane and just thank you firstly for taking the time to be on the podcast and for discussing these weighty issues. We value your voice and the wisdom that you carry, and we really celebrate you. When I was doing my research, I was telling you, and I saw just how much you are loved, and just the work that you've done over the years and the lives that have been impacted. I just wanted to say, man, we appreciate you. We love you and we honor your voice, and we're so grateful that, I think sometimes we often think that, saying yes to God and the call of God is easy. But, so I don't think the Bible says we must give honor to, where honor's due. And I don't think we adequately, do that, especially because saying yes to God comes with its own costs. And so,
thank you so much for having me, man.
Appreciate you.
I'm excited for what God is doing through your life, and you're just giving birth to this particular podcast. There is such a confidence that I have in people that walk in a level of accountability. It's you. I have a few other young guys in the church that are busy coming up, and I have so much confidence in what you guys are doing, because I've also seen the level of accountability that you walk in. One of the things about you that I deeply appreciate is you wouldn't do anything without asking me first. And no matter what, I mean, at times you would even laugh when I would say to you, I'll just do it. Why did you have to call me for that?
Yeah.
But again, it is your nature. It is because you understand accountability. You understand how to go about your things. And I mean, obviously with your work schedule, I don't see much of you. But what a lot of people don't know is that we've always been in contact, and I've always been aware of your movement, where you're doing, what's happening in your life, what's happening in your space. So it excites me to see that you are finally giving birth to this particular platform. And I think I've been one of the guys that have really been pressing you to get your stuff out, get your work out there. And we've got you, I'm really, really excited for what God is doing through you. And the New Breed podcast, I'm telling you, this is going to be just one of those podcasts that everybody wants to come to and listen to. As I said earlier in our interview, that what made me comfortable with your podcast was the type of conversations you hold with me offline. You don't ask me nonsense. You don't waste a minute of my time. You apply what I say. You remain teachable. And we are able to have weighty conversations offline. You never come into the room to speak about somebody. You never come into the room to cast aspersions upon somebody's character or to slander somebody. And you don't speak about things that has nothing to do with you. You're the type of I mind my own business type of guy. And that's not because you don't care about certain things, but you just understand the weight of certain things. And that has made me so comfortable with you. And that is one of the reasons why I said, hey, listen, man, whatever you do, they're with you, I back you, I run with you, we do this thing together. So I believe this is going to be an explosive podcast platform. And I hope I get another invitation to come back. But thank you.
Oh, man. So I'm going to close off with something that Apostle Brandon Bailey said that pushed me into launching this podcast. He said to me, sometimes you've got to run even when you have a thorn in your flesh. Even when it's not perfect, you're still struggling and you think you need to be perfect. Don't worry about that. God's grace is sufficient. So wherever it is that you are, wherever it is that God is calling you to, we hope that these conversations will be of value to you, value to your journey, and that we would see everything that God is using you to do for what God is doing in the nation. Love you so much. And until next time, God bless.